Okay, for those of you who are here to hear a talk, I'm it. I am the panel. My name is Rob Newman, and we are going to be talking about a couple of areas of Atari that not very many people know about. I was not involved so much. I mean, I was up in Silicon Valley for a little while, but I was really more in some special projects, and so, you know, I was brought into Atari's LA lab, which we're going to talk about here, from Malibu Grand Prix, which was co-owned along with Atari. They were both owned by Warner Communications, and you know, was brought in to work on a few projects over at LA Lab, which was a small corporate R&D lab in Burbank. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about another project that some of my work at LA Lab grew into, which was actually a bigger deal. And so, unfortunately, what I'm going to have to do, because we can't really see the screen too well, I'm going to have to do a certain amount of this in the dark. So wherever the light switch is, that's what this is. This is like, maybe not. Oh, there we go. Yes. Yes. Sure. Sure. It's a laptop, it can move. Yeah, as long as we're not pulling on the cables. Okay. So I was supposed to do this talk along with a colleague of mine by the name of Ray Corns. Ray was one of my colleagues at Atari Los Angeles Lab. That is my real badge, by the way, from Atari. That is 30 years ago. I did have color in my hair. For those of you that don't know, the little wizard on there, the little wizard you get on your badge when you work for corporate research, which was pretty cool. So you'll hear people that work for corporate research sometimes talking about themselves as Atari wizards, which is pretty cool. Ray was, unfortunately, he has a work commitment and had to bail out on Friday or Thursday. But Ray was also an engineer. He was a software engineer at LA Lab and was director of engineering for the Atari Activision joint venture. So he was my boss in the Atari Activision joint venture, which we'll get into. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Atari LA Lab. LA Lab, located in Burbank. And not just in Burbank, but we were in the middle of the Warner Brothers ranch studio lot. So literally outside the front of the door of LA Lab was let's see here. First we had the plane from Fantasy Island, okay, which was made of plywood. We had the Private Benjamin TV set. We had the Partridge Family house, the Bewitched house, the Father Knows Best house. And then you guys remember, you know, there was a season of Friends where the beginning of Friends, they were all dancing around in a fountain. Okay, that fountain was there too. And I watched them film Gremlins while I was there. And part of Ghostbusters as well. Oh, wow. So we used to call it... And it was the building was actually a temporary building, as you have on movie lots. So it was actually on jack stands. And we used to call it Fantasy Trailer. So it was really a fun, unique place. So we were a small, long-term corporate R&D lab. We worked on special projects. So you know, we didn't have a lot of the stress of, you know, we got to get this shipped, we got to get this shipped, we got to get this shipped. We got to work on, you know, the fun stuff. And then it actually started out not as a group with an Atari, but it actually started out as a group working on the Qube cable TV system for Warner Amex Cable, which we'll get into here in a minute. But it was transferred to Atari because the project for Qube, where these guys did the real-time programming and the business programming for the Qube cable TV system, that was coming to an end. And talk a little bit about LA Lab. Okay, so it was 13 people, mostly software engineers. I was actually a hardware person. Headed by a very savvy software engineer, and we had an Australian office assistant who was an absolute riot. To give you an idea of the caliber of some of the people working there, the guy who was my boss, at least nominally, I actually answered the director, but the guy who was, you know, on paper in between me and the director, used to be in charge of the space shuttle simulators for Rockwell. So, you know, pretty heavy group of people. How they let me in, I have no idea. Two mainframe computers. We had a Data General MV8000 and a Digital Equipment Corporation VaxLib 780, sitting in an air-conditioned room in the middle of this trailer with all of us with our offices around the perimeter. We had Atari 800s on each desk. Many of them had 10 megabyte Corvus hard drives connected to them through the game ports. So, pretty cool stuff. You know, again, remember, this is 1983, okay? We had one IBM PC in the office, and then we had one electronics bench, which was my world. I had an office as well as a bench that I was busy building. So let's talk about some of the projects. So first of all, we have the Qube cable TV system. The Qube cable TV system, it was actually a very groundbreaking cable TV system. Again, remember, 1983, 30 channels. Okay, now, not like today with 500 channels of nothing on, but 30 channels, which was many, many more than other cable systems for the time. They had real-time polling via special cable boxes, so they could actually do a poll in the middle of a TV program. You press a button on the console, and 30 seconds later, it would come up with a tabulation on the screen of how many people voted for what. Pretty cool stuff. Pay-per-view billing in 1983. Plans for wide area computer networking. Plans for home and business security systems. And these were systems that were actually in operation in Columbus, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Dallas. So, I mean, this was really out there. Great stuff. So, let's see here. One of the projects, actually, I was at Malibu Grand Prix at the time, where this was where LA Lab learned about me. I actually worked with them on a video game coin counter. So the coin-op, stand-up video games, you know, they have mechanical counters in them. You know, and you put a token in and it, you know, turns the counter one more coin, right? Well, we had developed, along with LA Lab and along with Atari's Grass Valley research lab, we had developed a networked system to count the tokens in each coin-op video game. And then it would do reporting back in the back office. So no longer do you have to go through the arcade, you know, with a cart that's got a coin counter on it. You dump all the coins in there, you run the coin counter, and you have to match that up with the numbers that are on the little coin counters in the arcade system. So now you've got something that is theoretically more accurate. Actually, it was more accurate, or just as accurate, and you've got built-in reporting, and people can operate and do their work at night faster in the arcades. Pretty cool stuff. Atari decided not to move forward with it because it would only make, $15, $30 million. Then another project that I worked on, we were doing local area networking of Atari 800s. And we have one installation of the system. We had a local area network around our office, but we actually did one third-party installation of it at Club Med Punta Cana. I missed out on going on that boondoggle trip by 1 week. Had I been in that lab 1 week longer, I would have gone. But what's really cool, and there are, I know somebody's got a prototype out there. I don't have one, but I've actually seen pictures of one on the internet. It was funny because the guy who has it, you know, he was talking about, well, this is something that Alan Kay designed, and you know, this and that. And finally, I emailed him and I said, okay, you really don't have it right here. I probably built that board, and Alan Kay actually stands for Atari Local Area Network Model K. At the time, also, the Association of Tennis Professionals world rankings were calculated on an Atari 800 in our office. which was pretty cool. We would, we would get a floppy disk from the ATP people. We would punch, put it into the computer. We'd tell it to start calculating, and then we would walk away for the weekend and come back to a room full of paper all over the floor. And then finally, Project ED. And ED stands for Electronic Distribution. And that is the one that turned out to be the big one. And so Project ED ultimately became the Atari Activision joint venture, the Electronic Publishing Systems. And this venture, we'll start out, it was a joint venture of Atari, Activision, and funded by Hillman Venture Capital, which at the time was the venture capitalists throwing around the most money up in Silicon Valley. It was oil money. Henry Hillman was in Pittsburgh. We were located at 1171 Borregas Avenue. Okay, to give you an idea of the location of that, Atari's corporate headquarters was a few doors down at 1265. Atari Corporate Research was across the street at 1196. So we were in the center of the Atari world, at least physically. And we shared the building with another startup called Little Text. And Little Text actually was, how forward-thinking some of these things are. Little Text, they were going to have little terminals at the home to give people news and weather and coupons and things like that. And eventually being able to purchase things in the home. Ultimately, that didn't go anywhere. We had 7 employees in the joint venture, and we had 10 million in committed venture capital, with 3 million of that already in the bank in 1983, of which I was one of the 5 co-founding managers. So what's the mission of this venture? To distribute video games to the home with wireless technology. So what's the service? Okay, you buy a wireless cartridge for $39.99. There's a subscription for $9.95 a month. Each cartridge is individually addressable. We had the capacity for 2 billion addresses. It would download 20 to 30 video games that we could change from week to week, and you would select it with your joystick and fire button. And it was all menu driven. Pretty trippy stuff. Not bad. So let's take a look. Okay, so now let's put this in context. What was it like in 1983? Because today, we don't think anything about having our phones in our pocket, which has more power than the mainframes of the time. And let's take a step back. The Atari 2600 was aging but still popular. Okay, 5200, I believe, had already come out, but the 2600 was still raging on. The popular PCs at the time, the Atari 800, Commodore 64, Apple II, still some Radio Shack Trash 80s out there. The IBM PC had been introduced in 1981. There was no consumer internet, shocking as that may seem. Dial-up telephone is the main data path to the home. And that's if you had a modem and knew how to use it. And even then, modems were 300 baud. And if you had $700, 1200 baud, 1200 bits per second. Wow. Compared to, what are we getting at home now, 30 megabits?
You get 50 now.
You get 50 now?
Yeah.
Okay. A little bit different. Okay, but there is no consumer wireless data to the home. Cellular networks at the time were analog and expensive. Okay, that's the world that we're operating in. So we're doing wireless distribution of video games to the home. How do you do that in that world? We'll get to that. First, let's take a quick look at a commercial. Now, the video game pictures and the menu pictures you see here are from the actual cartridge. Okay, this commercial was made for the test markets that we were going to do with this venture.
The electronic console, for your 20
2600. Okay. You get this adapter for the Atari 2600, and zap! You're in the electronic pipeline.
Pipeline?
Video game service that brings you 40 games for $9.95.
$9.95.
Come on!
And the adapter?
Oh, $39.95. We'll save on your too.
What's wrong with the games you have already?
Oh, but these games, they change weekly. You know, there's sneak previews, new games from the arcades.
What about hooking it up?
No hookup, no cable. And Mom says it's okay with her, if it's okay with you.
Well, we'll see.
Oh, boy! Martha, he said I could! The electronic pipeline. Get 40 games a month. Call 800 Hot Games. Play sneak previews. Call 800 Hot Games. New games weekly. Call 800 Hot Games and zap! You're in the electronic pipeline.
Yeah.
Pretty cool stuff, huh?
So was that ever aired on TV?
No. No, it was not aired on TV.
In Tulsa?
No. No. It is out there, and I'm sorry for the low sound. It's funny because, you know, I was the one that provided the video cassette. Yeah, again, 1983. I was the one who provided the video cassette, and somehow it found its way onto YouTube, and I had to actually download it from YouTube to show it here. So, and that was actually filmed on the same lot as LA Lab, which was a fun coincidence. And in fact, we end up hearing that they're filming this commercial. We go over, walk into the soundstage over there, over at Burbank Studios Ranch, and hey, this is pretty cool. We're looking around, All of a sudden, one of our guys, Kevin, goes walking up. And he's like, oh, check out this food. And he starts eating the food. We quickly got shown the door. Anyway, so that was, and what you saw in the picture, real cartridge, like that. That is a real completed cartridge. So what we have on here is, that's the menu button. That is for the FM antenna that you string out, and it plugs right into the 2600 cartridge. And I just took these here this last week, and so the cartridge is actually, this cartridge here, unfortunately it's not labeled, but I did bring it in, and it is out there in the museum. It's under glass out there, so you just kind of have to look around for it. I think it's in the same little display as some of the adult games. I don't know if John and Sean and Joe are trying to tell me something. But anyway, as far as the parts and pieces in here, that is the radio receiver. That actually is a toroidal coil to keep the radio noise from inside the cartridge, because it's a computer, from going outside, being radiated by the antenna. This is actually a custom chip. That is just an EEPROM, programmable ROM, and this is a lot of the electronics for dealing with some of the radio stuff. I think there's some memory over here and whatnot. But just a cartridge that plugs into the 2600. So in that world, 1983, you really only have a few options available to you as to how you're going to get that signal to the home. You have a telephone modem. It's all, the only people who are going to use those are techies. So, this is a consumer product. So is that really going to be much of an option for us? And at that time, 1983, were phone calls still expensive?
Yes.
Yeah. So, may not be optimal. Cable TV system. The original version of this was actually done via the vertical blanking interval of a cable TV channel. You can send data over the vertical blanking. The stuff, you remember the old days when we had the analog TVs and you do the vertical sync and you'd see the black line between the pictures?
Yeah.
Okay, you can actually put data in there. And they used to. Now the TV signals are all digital, so they put a lot of things in there. And so that was what they were originally doing this with, testing it. And so one night, Ray Corns, who was supposed to be up here, and somebody else out of, I think, the New York Atari Research Lab, they did a midnight test in New York. I think over vertical blanking of, I think it was MTV. And it was a very disappointing test. Because what they found was that in some cases, or actually in many cases, that vertical blanking interval data gets stripped. So much for going through cable TV. So that leaves, that was very disappointing. They were actually going to kill the project at that point. And then the kid at Atari, at LA Lab, me, comes along. I actually came from radio. Was actually a radio engineer, broadcast. I'm like, hey guys, there's this FM subcarrier thing, and the FCC had just opened up more spectrum for it. Really? Okay, so I write up a, they wanted me to do a write-up on it. Write up like a 5-page memo explaining it. About a week later, you're joining our venture. So, okay, well, let's talk about this. First of all, let's talk about how we do this with FM broadcast subcarriers, which is not something that any of us really think about these days. First of all, this is the system that ultimately we had created. At our offices in Sunnyvale, we had a VAX 11750. And that VAX 11750 would have the subscription or subscriber information, along with the serial numbers of their cartridges. It would also have the game information. And it would dial up an IBM PC that's sitting at the radio transmitter site over a regular telephone dial-up line. It would then send to that PC a file of the information for that particular market with all of the games and the the games that those people would be able to play in that market, and the cartridge numbers, the cartridge serial numbers that were authorized for that market. And then it would play it via an FM subcarrier, okay, and actually our subcarrier generator was a plug-in card in an IBM PC, completely digitally generated, which was virtually unheard of at the time. Take the output of that, plug it into the FM radio transmitter, and it then sends it to our cartridge and the 2600. Pretty crazy stuff, huh? So on the FM signal has a little more information on there than you and I hear. Okay, this is what's actually on the FM signal, and this is what the typical signal is put onto an FM radio station back in 1983. And if you've just got a mono radio, that's what you're hearing right there. Left plus right. Taking your left signal, your right signal, adding them together, okay, and that's what you've got. And then if you have stereo, then you get this other stuff. Okay, you have a signal here that is up in dog hearing range, and that's what tells your receiver that this is a stereo signal. And so it turns on the part of your radio receiver that starts creating the stereo, and then you have this signal here that is the difference information. So if you combine it in phase, you get left channel. If you combine it out of phase, you get right channel. That's how FM stereo works. And then above that, there's this kind of this blank no man's land that you're allowed to use up here. And at the time, that was used for some alternative programming. So if somebody couldn't afford a radio station, they would lease this subcarrier and they would send their little, basement radio station out to their friends, and there were actually receivers that you could buy that would actually receive that. That's also where sometimes the radio stations would put their telemetry from their transmitter coming back, so they didn't have to have a phone line coming back from the transmitter. But also stock quotes would be sent this way to special receivers that could receive it. So stockbrokers would have real-time stock quotes. So that was typical use. And in data use, typically the fastest that I'd ever seen of that was 9600 baud, 9600 bits per second. Typically it was 4800. Faster than dial-up. Not anywhere near as fast as what we're doing today, but not too bad. Just before I came up with what the FCC had expanded, well, the FCC had expanded it to actually being a wider subcarrier. They allowed us to use more. So here, that's before, and that's after. Well, if it's wider, that means we can do faster data rates. If we use a more efficient modulation technology, because the modulation technology they were using for data before, frequency shift keying, very inefficient as far as bandwidth is concerned. Easy to do, but very inefficient as far as bandwidth. So, okay, well, hotshot engineers that Steve and some of his colleagues were, they came up with a subcarrier that would run at 33.68 kilobits per second. 29 kilobits after overhead. Vestigial sideband suppressed carrier with quadrature sync. For those of you who have enough engineering background to figure that one out. And, okay, got this block thing, but this is what it really looked like. That is actually a spectrum graph. And so in this picture, there's the mono, there's the stereo pilot, there is the stereo information, and that was our subcarrier, taking up the entire rest of it. A lot of stuff. These guys did an amazing job. I was responsible for the relationships with the broadcast stations, trying to get the data to the radio stations, and a number of other things. But we actually contracted with an engineering consulting firm that actually was headed up by that time, disbanded LA Lab. So he collected a couple of other really great engineers who had experience in working with things Atari, and they came up actually with this system. So some of the parts and pieces, that's the actual FM subcarrier generator. Plug-in card in an IBM PC, completely digitally generated, again, unheard of at the time. The only analog on the card was a low-pass filter in the output. So the signal comes right out of that BNC connector there and goes right into the FM broadcast transmitter. Now, this was not just in the lab. We actually alpha tested it in LA, San Jose, and San Francisco on real radio stations. By the way, that spectrum picture, that was actually being transmitted by KBLFM, and that was the signal that I picked up off the cartridge itself in Milpitas. Not bad. And with the actual cartridge plugged into a 2600. We also were ready to go do test marketing. And we had 3 designated test markets: Utica, New York, Terre Haute, Indiana, and God help me, Steubenville, Ohio. Apologies to anyone who's from Steubenville. And we got really close. How close did we come on this venture? The prototypes and the transmission technology were tested. We had our manufacturing partner selected. The test market radio stations were ready for installation. We had the telemarketing firm engaged in Sparks, Nevada. The print and TV ads were already created. We had the cash in the bank to support the marketing effort, ready to go forward. So ultimately, what happened? Atari was sold and crashed. During all of this, I remember sitting in a banquet room at a hotel near San Jose Airport. And it was an Atari managers meeting. There were 400 managers there from Atari. And it was quite a party, at least beforehand. And Jim Morgan, who was the CEO of Atari at the time, he had been brought in to follow up after Ray Kassar. Ray Kassar did leave a bit of a mess on his hands. But you need to remember what happened with Atari. Atari started throwing off a whole lot of losses. It had grown to be a very large company, a couple billion in sales, a few thousand employees. But the bigger it got, the worse the games got. And there's a screening, I understand, this afternoon of the unearthing of all of the cartridges that were dumped in the desert. That was part of it. And Jim Morgan gets up there on the dais and says, okay, I was going to have Alan Alda come in, and we were going to have a whole bunch of happy talk, and everything was going to be great. Alan Alda was the spokesperson for Atari. And he said, you know what? I decided that we're all adults here, so I'm going to give it to you straight. A few months from now, half of you will not be here. Could have heard a pin drop. And the rest of the meeting was not so happy. Then it was, I don't remember how long after that it was, but it wasn't all that long after that, that all of a sudden, and Jim Morgan didn't even know it was coming. Oh, and with that crash, by the way, with Atari starting to throw off losses, understand that there was insider trading that was taking place. Not only within Atari before the financials were reported, but also in Warner, the parent company. People went to jail for that. When those losses were reported, this was the time of the hostile takeover bids. Rupert Murdoch made a hostile run for Warner Communications. And it took an awful lot for Warner to fight him off, and ultimately the things that they did to fight off Rupert Murdoch ultimately led to eventually the merging with Time Inc. The need to merge with Time Inc. Now, with Warner, if things are going great, life is good, you can do whatever you want. If things are going badly, God help you. And so, as soon as they undid a certain amount of the mess, they got out of all quote, non-core businesses. Atari was the first to go. They sold it to Jack Tramiel, nothing down, $250 million, 10 and 12-year notes. That, I mean, they just dumped it. And so Jack Tramiel comes in. There's the story about he pulls up in his Rolls Royce right in the handicapped parking spot over there at 1265 Borregas, and just starts laying waste to the company, pretty much. The employees got wind of it. They called the police. His Rolls Royce was immediately ticketed. How appropriate. Within a couple of months, Atari was down to less than 200 people. When they talk about a crash, it was a crash. So understand that it created a whole lot of uncertainty, okay? That's a bit of an understatement. The test market was canceled 4 days before I was to leave to install the transmitter equipment at Utica, New York. But management had cash. And hey, when you have a startup, you have a whole lot of cash. What happened during the whole .com time when they had a whole bunch of cash? Hey, let's keep doing development, let's party, and let's go visit all our friends and all of that. Well, Okay, this was the first time I saw the movie right here. So they just kept on going because doing any test market at that point would force a day of reckoning. So ultimately, it was time to go. They kept it going, I think, for about another year, spending the money, but by that time I had already bailed. So, you know, pretty incredible to be part of a startup of that kind of a, that kind of a project. Being so out there and forward and so much going on, advanced technology and all of the rest of it. And I learned a lot. And ultimately, I ended up leaving engineering and went back to school, got a degree in entrepreneurship from USC. And then as Ray actually was introducing me to somebody one time, he was like, yeah, Rob used to be a great engineer, and then he went to the dark side and got an MBA. I laughed so hard at that one. He wasn't sure whether I was going to laugh or cry. So anyway, that's a whole lot in a relatively short period of time. There is so much more to the story, but happy to answer questions along the way. Let's see what we can do here about lights. Here we go. Yes?
What was Activision's involvement in the whole project aside from lending their name?
It's not that they were lending their name, they actually were lending games.
Oh.
And so they put in a few $100,000. Atari owned 60%, I think Activision owned 10 or so percent. Hillman Venture Capital owned, a certain portion. And then the venture capital firm owned a portion, and management owned a portion. And in fact, what's interesting is when Jack Tramiel took over Atari, bought it as Atari Corp, where under Warner it was Atari Inc. He thought he got Atari's piece of this venture. He didn't. It was actually a violation of the partnership agreement, or of the joint venture agreement, to transfer ownership without offering it to the other owners first. And as a result, Warner not only kept it, and Jack Tramiel didn't get it, and we were very relieved, but Warner, as a result of that, lost all of their voting ability in the governance of the company. Very interesting. Anything else? Yes? Yeah? Yes?
Okay.
Sorry, I'll get to you.
Okay, so you could only sell this to places where you had an FM station broadcasting.
Yeah, we do it market by market.
Yeah, and so you'd have to tune the cartridge to the FM station?
It would tune automatically. It would go out and automatically find the signal, lock onto it, and validate it. And we were sending the signal, it was actually in an endless loop. And the endless loop would go about a minute. And so it would go out, and actually on the cartridge, when you turn the cartridge on, it would come up initially with an electronic clock line logo, and then it would show, it would have a black screen with this yellow bar going across, left to right. And it would stop every now and then, and it would keep on going, and then it would finally lock into one spot. Well, that yellow bar actually was telling us that it was tuning. Now, other people just saw a yellow bar going across and thought that was pretty cool. And then it would validate the cartridge, and up would come a menu. And you select your game with the menu. Hit the fire button, and then it listens to that endless loop signal for the right game, downloads the game, and you play it as if you have that cartridge right there. Pretty cool. Yes.
So,
oh, I'm sorry, you were next.
My question was there any talk of maybe keeping the game in the system, like some type of RAM, or was it basically like where you turn it off, you have to redo those?
That is a technology that was not really all that available yet, and it was, remember, this cartridge, I mean, it was $39.99. Okay, prices today, just to give you an idea, I checked the consumer price index. Okay, multiply it by 2.3, and that's what the price would be today, the equivalent price today. So it'd be about $100. So, you have to build it relatively inexpensively, and that kind of memory, I don't even know if it existed quite then. It may have, I don't know. It's here. Jerry?
Oh, well, I was just curious about, were there studies done to see if people would go for this $9.95? It does seem like it might be a little high for back then.
Yeah.
But it was also a wireless system. We had games that were
I
rotating.
understand all the advantages, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious if they did some kind of research or studies or something to see if people would pay that.
You know what? I don't remember, but that's also what the test markets were about.
Yeah. Oh, the test market would be an actual market.
Yeah.
That's right. You're actually
yeah.
selling it. You're
Yeah.
not giving it away.
Yeah, or as you know, when I'm talking to, you know, when I used to talk to clients about, you know, going to market, I would say, okay, guys, we need to crash test this product. Well, that's exactly what it is.
Well, cartridges back then were more than that.
Cartridges back then were, you know, 20, 30, 40 bucks. Yes.
Right.
Any concerns, you know, when transmitting the game over the FM signal of piracy of the games? You know, people could take that game raw, yes, at the time, and then I guess burn it and sell it as an illegal copy. Or was that really not a concern at the time?
We weren't concerned about it. I mean, first of all, the technology that it would take in order to do that, you wouldn't be able to pick it off from the air because you would have to know how to decode it from the air. Okay, first of all, there's the transmitted signal to begin with. Then you've got to get through the encryption of it. And then you've got to, you know, figure out, okay, what's the format of the data stream that we have. Now, you know, I suppose you could probably try to do it from, you know, the interface with the game unit.
Yeah.
But, okay, if anybody is really that hell-bent,
Have that.
yeah, you know, and if a game is that popular,
Yeah.
it's probably going to get released in the stores anyway.
How was it, I guess each unit had like a unique identifier or serial number or something in there that, I guess, you know, central station knew all the authorized units around on the market, so, but it's...
Well, that was uploaded, it was uploaded by market to the IBM PC that drove the transmitter for that market.
Okay.
And then how did you use that ID?
To authorize the cartridge. So basically, if the cartridge, when you plugged it in and turned it on, it had amnesia. So it was essentially, you know, unauthorized at that point. And then when you turn it on, it goes out and finds the signal. It looks for that serial number for validation. And then once it receives that serial number, there's a toggle in the software or a flag that gets set in the software that says, okay, you're authorized now. Now we can give you the menu and stuff. Yes.
Were there any games planned since you were so close? Were there any of the Activision games that we may know about that were planned for this thing?
Not all of my brain cells are still there. So this is 30 years ago. So I don't even remember. I mean, I would, to be honest, I would have to look at the commercial to see what the games were because that was an actual cartridge.
Oh.
Yes.
Were you guys inspired at all by the Game Line project, or is it something that happened like almost similar, like in parallel almost?
I don't remember us talking about it at all.
No, because Game Line was not wireless though. It was through dial-up.
We were in our own little Atari world. So, but I don't remember any of us.
And the
talking
irony is
about it.
that the makers of Game Line became eventually AOL.
Yep, this was before AOL. In fact, one of the things that I have in my notes was that, okay, AOL hadn't really happened yet, and that CompuServe was really the big system. You had some bulletin board services out there, but really it was, you know, it was the geek world, and this is a consumer product. Yes?
What was the average download speed?
How long it took to download, or the speed of the actual data?
How long it took?
The endless loop was typically, you know, 40 seconds, a minute. We could run up to a minute and a half. Yes?
And these were complete games?
Yep. Yep. Full game. Somebody in the back had a hand up. No? Yes.
So what would happen, say you bought it and then you moved to somewhere else that didn't have the service available?
Call 1-800-HOT-GAMES and we'll talk about it.
What about the size of the size of the games? There must have been a limit. Was it 8K or something?
I don't remember, but it was probably 8 or 16. Yeah. Yeah. Well, here, let me catch over here.
So did any other companies kind of leverage your guys' ideas or your patents from this and come out with a different consumer product?
To be honest, I don't remember any discussion of patents from the time I was there. But at the time, you know, and actually I was talking with Gary Kitchen about this last night at the alumni dinner. Gary Kitchen was part of the Activision panel. At the time, the emphasis was really on getting the products out there, and software patents hadn't really come in yet. You know, you hadn't had the Supreme Court decisions that allowed the patent office or forced the patent office to issue software patents. And so it was really more a matter of let's get the thing coded, let's get it out there, let's get it on the market so we can make some money. That was really more of the ethos at the time. And in fact, you know, some of what we were talking about last night is some of the work that they're doing now is some expert witness work. Because, you know, more recently, there are software patents being filed where they're claiming some of this technology that was done back in the days of Atari and Activision. And so it's like, okay, guys, we got prior art here. You can't have that one. So, yes?
Can you describe the antenna? You mentioned just a wire loop. What was it?
You know what, the antenna, it was actually really simple. I mean, really, it was, I mean, little RCA connector, you know, not unlike you have on the back of your stereo, going to a little piece of coax up to what's called a balun, and then that would go out to a couple of wires and you just string them out. I mean, and it was, you know, certainly easier to deal with and nicer to look at than, you know, those twin lead loops that, you know, that we used to see. But that was all it was. Pretty simple. Yes?
Have you ever thought about writing a book?
Not sure I want to write about some of this stuff. The thing with a lot of the stories with Atari, you know, I mean, and anytime you're dealing with this stuff, yeah, there's a lot of technology and there's a lot of lore that goes along with this, but you've also got a lot of people. And, you know, when you have people and you have things that are moving fast, you have money, you have all these other things, that sometimes the things that you would end up writing are things that are going to get you in hot water in court. So you got to be careful about some of that. So we're a little past the time. One last question. Anybody?
Here?
Yes.
Could you tell us a little more about the alpha test you were describing? How many people were involved? How did the system perform? And
It actually was okay. You know, the alpha testing, it's alpha testing, it's not beta testing, so it wasn't with customers. I mean, it was, let's put it on a radio station, and let's go running around with the 2600 and go visit friends' houses, put it up, and, you know, let's plug our test equipment into it, and let's see what the signal looks like, and let's see if it downloads games. I mean, really, that's what it was. So, you know, and actually it's funny because, you know, that spectral picture that I showed, that spectral picture was one that was taken, and I didn't even know that that still existed. That was sent to me by Ray, actually, on Thursday. And so he sends me that and a few others scanned. And on the front it's that spectral picture. And then he also shows the back of it. And the back of it is my handwriting with the date, October something, you know, 1984. You know, and that's what all we were doing at the time, was we were going different places and, you know, trying it out. I mean, that's all you can do in alpha testing. It's really what it's about. Validating it's going to work. And there were times it didn't, you know, and that's the nature of radio signals sometimes.
were there any technical concerns that were still being worked out at that
I'm
point?
sure there were, but, you know, I would rather remember the good stuff.
How many of these units have been made by the time that the plug is pulled?
7.
Oh boy.
Alpha testing. It was alpha testing. We weren't in beta testing. So I have 2 of the 7. And Ray actually has the subcarrier generator.
Wow.
So, yes?
What are you doing now?
I am currently manager of budget and forecast for a large food cooperative managing a $4 billion budget process. So I am in a very different world and actually refer to myself more as a recovering engineer than anything else. All right, so I think that's it. Thank you for the time. I hope this was